There we go. There we go. So thanks, everybody. And let's get started. Mr. Barnett, thanks so much.
Yeah, once again, my name is Kumasi Barnett, Kumasi J. Barnett. I'll just tell you a little bit about my work, a little bit about how I got here and what I am about. To start off, I would just say how it came about. So these are comics appropriated from my own collection. So when you look at them, they're the actual comics from my collection. They've been altered, I think improved, but changed as little as possible to create new narratives. Like I make these fantasy stories, these stories that have been told throughout history into real stories, into true stories. So what I do is I take familiar characters like Spider-Man, Hulk, the Thor, Superman, Action Comics, and what I do, Daredevil, and what I do is I create new work, new characters. Like Spider-Man transforms into the policeman, the thug, the amazing black man, racist comics, and so on and so forth. How it really began is in 2015, I was living in Brooklyn, where I was working and living and showing work. And Freddie Gray was killed in the back of a police van on his way to being detained. For a while, there was an uprising and there was a ton of conflict. And it was happening in Baltimore, no more than 5-10 minutes from where my dad lives right now, and from where I spent a lot of time in my life. And I felt this powerlessness, like I couldn't be there in the way that I wanted to be there for support, for action. And I couldn't voice what I was feeling through the abstraction that I was doing at the time. Because I was trained as a traditional abstract artist, if that's such a thing, but it was what my focus was. So I was looking for a way to really work those feelings and what I was thinking about, what I've been raised with, my history, and what I was doing was for me. So what I found was I looked in my closet at the comics that were stored there from years upon years ago, because I was raised on comics. And these were things that were valuable to me, things that I have been collecting my entire life. And I thought to myself, you know what, I'm going to do something with this since it has so much personal history. It was a part of my youth. It was nostalgia. It was memory. It was history for me that was real and history that was fiction at the same time. And what I did was I took these old little happy memories of collecting comics, reading comics, being really engaged in comic book collecting, and I turned them into a way to express not only my history, but what was happening now. But then I had like these 15 works that looked nothing like anything else that was in my entire history of painting. And I had a crisis of whether I needed to show this to anyone or just remain personal. Because throughout life, artists usually do multiple things at the same time, but one thing's more important than the other. And what I decided was I needed to get them out of the studio. I didn't mean to, but I was having a show in Brooklyn that summer, and I brought not only the work that I was doing in abstraction, but I brought the comics with me, not intending to have them get out. And it was a hard fall. Like I had the works there and I was like, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? You know what? No one's even going to see this. So let's get it out there. It was at Sulphur Bath Studios in Brooklyn, and I put them on the wall. And that's what you see here. This was the biggest step. This was the first installation. I didn't expect any feedback. It was a fight between myself. It was just like installation that was personal and relevant. It addressed everything I was interested in, but not what I wanted to talk about. And these early pictures are before the wall had spackle, before it was painted, before it was detailed. And they're so bad because all I had was my phone with me. I didn't intend to document this. I didn't intend for it to be something that I shared with other people, except for who was coming to that show. And what happened was, it started the conversations that I actually wanted to have. So this was one of the first, I like to call it the first 15 of them. And like I said before, how it's made is I alter as little of the comic as possible to make them true stories, to reveal actual stories. Some are instantaneous. Like I look at the cover and I say, oh, I know what this is. Others are ideas in search of like a visual comic book. Some, I've owned so many comic books that something will come to mind immediately and I'll have an image of what that comic book is to relate to that. Some of them I stare at forever, it feels like, until they reveal what they actually need to become. The works themselves are parables. I come from an oral tradition mostly. So stories are passed down generation to generation, and they are stories to protect, to give children understanding, but to also give them power. So told from father to child, mother to child, like fables, but their fables always have a purpose. And a lot of that is to keep people safe. So here they're put to painting, they're put to paper, they're put to paint, because I am a painter. I speak with color. Other people I feel should do it in their own medium. Like, I think it's more important to be what you are and let that shine rather than force yourself into something that isn't you. So if you're a singer, you should sing about what you love. Like a gospel singer who's a singer first is going to be, in my opinion, more powerful than someone who is in the church who decides to sing. But the works themselves are really, I think of them, I should say, as tropes of America. They're true, but they're also cliches, they're allegories, they're metaphors of what really happens in America, what America is about, what America doesn't want to admit it is about. And they're common tropes. They're known, they're understood. They're often overlooked by other people outside of America in lieu of all of the mass-produced nostalgia that we make in America, all of the movies, all of the television that we pump out and send across the world. So buried behind all of that pop culture, buried by those who have the ability to do that, to hide the truth or want to hide the truth. What these do is talk about what is real here, what actually happened, what repercussions there are for what has happened, the debts that need to be paid for America, the facts that have been painted over. And combining all of them together is sort of, for me, it's a way to reveal truth and the goal of saving truth for prosperity, to put down truth concretely so it can't be ignored later as simply myth. It will be brought to life with other media, other important things that happen. The biggest problem I have is that these are contextual to America at any point in American history. Like, any of these stories are true. They're more American than America is to Americans even. We're so fond of moving on without addressing the actual issues that have happened. Like, we want forgiveness without doing any of the work. We want unity without coming to the table with anything to offer, without sacrificing anything, without offering anything. I'm not particularly religious in one sect over another, but it is absolution without confession, in my opinion. That's how I feel about it. The stories really are from my perspective because I can tell my story better than anyone else, and telling other people's stories really doesn't feel as true and as valid. And I don't want to take other stories away from them. I want to talk about them. I want to shine light on them, but I don't want to reframe other people's stories. But much of it is not just my story, it's our story. Like, our voices are the same. They aren't exactly the same, but they do harmonize. Like, a lot of it is in the same range. We're cousins, like, and all my cousins know what that means. We're play cousins, we're school cousins, we're neighborhood cousins. But to talk about myself, once again, my name is Kumasi J. Barnett, because my father doesn't believe that you need middle names. He believes you only need a middle initial. So I have a middle initial with a period. I'm from Baltimore. I was born in Providence, Rhode Island, but I was raised in Turner Station, just outside of the city limits. I have an MFA from the Ohio State University in painting and drawing, and a BA from the University of Maryland in studio art, and another BA in art history and archaeology. So I come from it from all perspectives. But I started my career, or I started in general, as at the Dundalk Community College, which is the community college of Baltimore County. And I got an AA in general studies right after high school. And studying there was probably the most important thing to my educational experience. So I started at Dundalk, where I found out I wasn't stupid. Like, I found out what it takes to actually study. I'd never studied in high school. I'd never studied in school that I can remember, period. I didn't even know what the context for that was. I just thought people got good grades because they were smart. I also had teachers who said I had something. Like, I was recommended for an honor society in math, which was really strange for me. But I think in my high school, middle school, elementary school life, if you weren't a problem or you weren't outstanding, you weren't really thought of. And I can understand it because you were getting along just fine. So there was nothing really to be worried about. So Dundalk Community College is really where I shined, where I understood where to go next. But after there, I essentially worked for 8 to 10 years-ish, making money. And I made good money, like excellent money, until a gentleman said a sentence while I was working that made me no longer want to work that job. And the sentence was, you only have to do 20, 25 more years of this and you're set. And that completely reevaluated my whole life. Because 20 to 25 years doing something that you don't enjoy, to live a life that is not much different than the life you had before, except everything was a version of better, it wasn't really in the plan. So that's when I decided to go back to school. I went to grad school, did the whole thing. Y'all are between, like, I'm guessing between like 17 and 22, and you have a whole nother decade before you even get to that crux of the point where I got to. Like, I was probably 28, 29 when I really decided what I want to do. And you don't necessarily have to answer that question right now, but you do have to think about where you want to be with your life. And you have to keep asking yourself, what do I want to do? What do I want to be? Where do I want to go from here? It's important to know that you decided what you want to do with your life. I've decided on art. It's something I'll do no matter what else I do. It makes me content. Like, happiness is kind of up and down, but like, I'm really content with what I do. Even when I struggle with it, it's a good struggle. It's not always fun. There's failure, there's success, but I know what I'm doing because I have a long-term goal that I've decided on myself. I can do it forever. I will do it forever, probably. And this work has allowed me to express things that I couldn't express before. Because if I was a writer, this would be poetry, or it would be a novel, or it would be short stories. But I am a painter. So it is expressed through color, light, idea, concept. And, you know, I reserve the right to change my mind one day. That's always an option. Success for me is the contentment and the ability to do what I want to do, what I want to build, and what I want to accomplish over a lifetime. Being with and around people I like, doing what I enjoy, when I enjoy it. When I struggle, I know what I am struggling for, and I know what is important. I know we have young students here, and the important thing, I think, is to build your own version of success and don't be judged by other people's versions of success. That is not an easy thing to say. It is a much harder thing to accomplish in your life, and it constantly needs revisions. You have to remind yourself why you're doing things, why you're here, what the plan was. And that you can define and redefine over your lifetime. You can understand it over your lifetime. If you really like money and power, like, you can go into banking and Congress, but you have to understand why. In my opinion, you need to know why you do it, because keeping up with others is fine. It's cool, but it doesn't really prove your value or prove your worth to yourself. Proving others wrong doesn't really prove your worth to yourself. So come back to what you are interested in, what is important to you, and understand that you are in control. My work is my work, and I don't really talk about too much what each individual piece is, because I understand that you understand what the work is. The beauty of being a painter is that it can be understood beyond language. So I want you to understand what you are, and then come to the work and understand that we can relate to what the work is, and then talk about it. That's pretty much what I wanted to say, but I would want to say you are in control of what you want your life to be. You can define it, and exercise. That's the last thing. You'll thank me in like 50 years. Now, what questions do you have?
So this is where I come in. So I would ask the students, please use the chat to ask Kumasi any questions that you have, and I'll be reading them from there. But I'll start off with one myself, Kumasi. You began your presentation saying that you create new narratives by telling new stories with old stories. Can you talk about the importance of telling these new, pushing the narrative, telling these new narratives with old stories, and how that is influential through your art, and how that helps impact society?
Well, it's interesting because it's important, because the combination of these comic books already having history, already having a timeline to them when they were made, and then bringing a new story to it, which is actually an old story, and just bringing it to light, merges together to create a history that is more true than the history most of us were taught. So the importance for me is that these are actually, I wouldn't say historic, but historical comics, that some are worth a lot of money, some have inherent value, some are rare, as rare is, but to make them into a thing that is real instead of this fabricated narrative is important to what my work is.
I like that. I like that you say that, because you said some of these have value and are worth actual monetary value, but you want to make your art into, I guess you could say, historical value, right? That's sort of like timeless, like the expression that you're trying to get through your art. There's actually a question in here from Pat Horenberg, who says, was there a problem or permission needed to use the Marvel/DC's name still on the comics?
Oh, no, there's no problem. I would, so there's, of course, there's artistic license, which allows you to alter things if you're making a new artistic creation out of what it is. But more importantly than that, I think Marvel and DC don't want this conversation. And I am more than happy to have this conversation with them, but I don't think it's the thing that they want to really investigate.
Right.
So.
No, that's you're definitely right on that one. So I don't know if any other students have any questions. Okay, here we go. We got one from Shanae. Forgive me, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, but she says,
my first name right. It's all good.
Shanae, yeah, Shanae, I know who you are. Do you make prints of your work or sell originals? Also, do you print them on t-shirts? If so, what platform do you sell them on?
So I don't at this point. I sell through a gallery, Low Riding Projects in Los Angeles, because each one is a unique individual art piece. T-shirts and prints are interesting in the, what is his name? Murakami sense, where it's production as part of art and blending the lines between capitalism and art production and intrinsic value. But that is not yet something I'm super interested in with this work. Yeah.
Right. So I have a question myself, because you talked about earlier, you talked about how you took happy memories, you know, and turned them into new memories. So I want to know a little bit more about your process. You kind of mentioned it throughout your presentation, but I want you to walk me through the process of your art. Like, do these ideas come to you just kind of like automatically? Do you find inspiration within yourself, or do you find inspiration from outside factors as well? And like, when you do have an idea, do you sit on it for a while, or did you kind of, sometimes do you wake up and say, I got one? Or are there periods where you kind of have, you know, hey, I haven't thought of a new idea in a while? But I'm just curious to know what the process and, you know, more probably like the thought process you go through when creating a new piece, or maybe you're looking at an old comic trying to change that old story into a new story, and what that looks like.
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything. So there are some works that I immediately see and I know what they're going to be. I know how it's going to happen, and I know it just screams out a certain narrative that I am invested in. And then there are others that I'm interested in what the cover is, and I'm interested in what that image is and what it can become, but I have no idea what it is going to become. The beauty of being an artist for as long as I've been an artist is I write down what my ideas are that are in search of images, and I have a stack of images that are in search of ideas. And because I have so many of these things happening at the same time, like, I am never at a loss for what to do next. There's always work to be done. Like, when I finish these paintings that are sitting right in front of me, like, there's a whole pile of paintings that I've been meaning to get to that I'm really excited about. So I'm like, if I can finish painting, I can finally paint, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm trying to stay away from the news and information from that sense, because I'm so interested in historical events that actually are current day events, and the combination of the two being the same, and the constant, repeating of history. But I like to bring it all the way back and then have that image immediately translate to what's happening now. But there's one that I'm really struggling with. It's just not working.
Well, I would like to see the ones that are coming, given up what's going on in the world right now. I can't wait to see some of your next illustrations. So we still have more questions coming in from the chat. I think this student's name is pronounced Shayleo Quintalia. I'm sorry, I'm just totally butchering your name. I'm just going to stop. And so, but the student asks, do you have a specific story when you witnessed someone was truly inspired by the narratives of your artwork?
Well, I mean, it's happened a couple of times. The one that springs to mind immediately was the show in LA at Low Rhine Gallery. And there was a young boy who was just like 2 inches away from the work. And he was there with his older sister. He was about 10 and his older sister was like 20. So it was a big disparity. But she was like, go on, say something. And he just like, this is me. And I was like, yeah, it is. Yep, that's all that needs to be said.
Right.
And I think the further step was tell me about it. And I was like, no, you tell me about it.
Yeah.
And that's really where it gets me.
Yeah. No, because I have a few examples that I want to tell you about and get your we'll get to that later on because we do have some good questions coming in. So one student wants to know, how would you or have you handled the inevitable backlash of those that choose to be offensive, who choose to be offensed by your art instead of understanding the message?
Well, it's super easy for me because people aren't offended in person like you would think they would be.
Right.
People are offended in spaces where they're anonymous. So while people like me, I am extremely open to confrontation in terms of ideas.
Right.
So like, I want to have that conversation. And if you're offended by it, I want to have that conversation. But I get mostly people who will say something under their breath in the way while they're leaving. So like, yeah, I'm fine with it.
Yeah. But
the internet is the internet. Yeah.
I think that's what I appreciate about your art, especially when I went up to art gallery, it invokes certain feelings and certain emotions, but I know at the end of the day, it's to spark that conversation, right? You talked about how a lot of the art represents what's really true in America. And, a lot of the, I like the amazing Black man illustrations, the media, the Hulk with the media, because that's something that's big that we see. And then also, I think, I'm gonna go back, you showed it, it was Black man in America. And then there was a picture of it looked like a boy and a man, and they're both looking down, and then there was white at the bottom. But I noticed, you can't see it online, but I saw it in person. I noticed you had wrote down privileged at the bottom, but then you use white out to white it out. And I thought that was just kind of like, so I remember sitting there and trying to interpret that. I said, you know what? I look at the grown man, right? But how America sees, especially African-American men, how they used to use that racial trope boy, and sort of how like that boy that still is inside him is still trying to figure out this world and this America that we live in. And then also when you look at, white privilege, how there are ways in which people do try to cover that up, right? We look at what's going on in some of the schools in terms of like banning critical race theory, banning books from art. I mean, there are probably some states right now that probably wouldn't show your art because of what it represents, So I love that your art does that. And I think that's what's so fascinating about it, like for me. And so I'm gonna go on to another question, but that was coming to my mind as you were speaking. So this is from Madison. Which company do you think generates the most authentic representation in new comic, film / TV narratives? Marvel, DC, or independent publishers? Also, do you think the demand for representation from fans will encourage Marvel / DC to embrace more diverse narratives?
Well, I think it's definitely independent because there are tons of independent companies. There are a bunch of good, like non-Marvel DC, people of color owned comic companies and media companies that are doing stuff that is aimed at the non-Marvel audience, the non-white audience, I guess. I think as success comes, they will naturally start to make more of that. Because it is a bit of like, it's a bit of race, not racist, but like a staying in the singular narrative that they have produced for 50 to 60 years, 70 even. And every time they go outside of that narrative, they get a backlash from those who have bought their comic. And as each success happens, more diversity in their work happen. But let's not forget, before the Miles Morales Enter the Spider movie, he got the same backlash that the new characters are getting now.
Mm-hmm.
And then the movie came out and everybody's like, the movie's great, I love him now. So every single time there seems to be any sort of diversity in comic books, there is a backlash from those who collect before there is acceptance. I would really frame it for those companies as to get them to change, I would frame it as a way to make money.
Mm-hmm.
I would frame it as these are untapped resources that will buy your product. And not talk about it in terms of race, because they don't understand race, they don't understand equality, they understand money.
No, that's true, because I'm pretty sure Black Panther was one of the largest grossing Marvel movies, I think, when it came out. And so, and oftentimes when we're talking about diversity and representation, right? And it's coming from those stakeholders or from those decision makers who sit up at the top, usually that wedge is dollars, right? For that kind of gets them at the table. So I understand you in terms of like framing it as like money, because that'll get them to realize, oh, hey, yeah, the more representation we have, the more money we can make. Now, that's not necessarily probably, I don't know if you want to call it morally right. However, it's
not moral at all.
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
Companies work with, and people who have money work with people they know, they like, and they trust.
Mm-hmm.
And usually those people look just like them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So they do it thinking that they're doing something, not even bringing morals into the equation. So you basically have to prove that there is money to be made there, and then they will go outside of their box. And the real way to prove it is for us to make our own money.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, everybody comes swooping into the space.
Right. And it's funny, you talk about making your own money. And actually, before I go on, there was a question from a student, and I do want to get to this before I forget, but they were asking about what paint and other materials that you do use for your art. So I wanted to ask you that before we continue with the next part of the conversation.
Okay. Yeah, of course. These are mostly acrylic on paper, because the comic books are paper. So some of them are pretty old, so 60s and 70s, 50s. So I have to be really careful with the materials used. Everything except for like the first 10 or 15 is archival. So if there's marker or if there's pen, it's the same I would use if I was drawing on paper, and being really, really careful about what materials I use. The first ones, I was not expecting to do any more of these, so they're a little bit all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
But I love painting, so I can paint acrylic and oil. And I have this thing about traditional materials and traditional ways of working. So like I will chalk rabbit skin glue and chalk chalk grounds all my life.
I was gonna say, how long does it usually take you to complete a painting? Do you kind of flesh it out over a few days, few weeks, or can some you kind of get done in a day?
I would love to get something done in a day. They take until I have a deadline. So they'll take months, a year, until I'm like under the gun, because what will happen is I'll finish it to the point where I know exactly what it is, and I know exactly what it needs to become. And then once that idea is set completely, I'm really interested in the next idea, because the idea and the ideation and the work is so much fun that finishing those last pieces, doesn't really have the appeal that like starting something new does.
Okay.
I'm working on it though.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
And so do you have like a sort of like, I guess you could say threshold when you're completing a painting? Do you know when it's done, or do you look at it and say, I'm almost there, I'm not quite? Or is it kind of like you get to a point to where you make that last stroke and you're like, all right, this is it, I've done it on this piece? So what's that like?
Well, the threshold is I know when it's done.
Okay.
And I know what the final touches are on it and when it's finished. And there's also a point where you can't do anymore. we're just like, all right, anything more than this is too much. Because if I'm too good, or if I go too far, it just becomes too much and it's too locked in. And I like to leave something open. That's the way that other people can get inside for me.
Definitely. So I know, Pam, did you want to hop in here? Because I know I've been asking a few questions, but I want to get some other voices included. So Pam, if you wanted to jump on in, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm loving this so much. Thank you so much, Brandon, and of course, Kumasi. And I was interested to hear the answer that the students are asking about materials, because I've gotten that question in the gallery with the exhibition often. And for those of you who don't know, who weren't part of COC last year, we were able to show some of Kumasi J. Barnett's work online and give a Zoom, and he was kind enough to give us a Zoom talk last year. This year, we have the actual objects in the gallery, Gallery 206 in the library. It's a beautiful space and it just looks amazing. But I have to say, I had been fortunate enough to see some of the actual paintings at Lowell Ryan. So I knew that, and I do love seeing them digitally. Like as you're speaking, Kumasi, I just love like studying everything about them. But having the little, I mean, they're so small, they're so powerful, but they're so small materially. And they're just like, they just like vibrate on the wall. Having those objects in the space and seeing them and like connecting with them as a human looking at an object that was clearly painted. I mean, you are such a painter and there's clearly painted, is very different than looking at the digital images. And I wonder, I've had the question, you know, I've explained that you're a painter and you started as a painter and you're continuing as a painter in this way, but you know, the t-shirt question, or, well, you could just do this digitally and you wouldn't see the marks, right? Or sometimes the text is changed and you can tell that you're changing the text and it's not seamless, which of course I think is the poetry in addition to everything else going on conceptually with the work. But I'm curious, you know, how you think about that. Like the surfaces are, you know, not to turn it into a totally formal discussion, but there is a lot to see there materially as well. And so as you just said, you know, you like to leave a little bit of it open. It's so precisely done, and yet there is like, we can see your hand everywhere. It's touched and handled and created by a person. And I'm just wondering about that, how you think about that yourself, or what your goal is with that in terms of conceptually keeping it handmade.
Yeah, well, it's also part of that finishing effort. I can, at this point, I know and I am good enough that I can color correct, correctly color and paint anything. Like, and I can take it to a level of finish that would be way beyond what is necessary, but I am a painter. And like the painter part is important to me, to know that these were made. And I would say, I always say, digital art is valid. Like I can do what I can do. I can do art digitally as well as I can do art analog, I guess would be the version. But I like when my digital work uses the best part of what digital can do, right? So I don't want to make a digital drawing that I do, whether it's on an iPad, whether it's on a tablet to computer, look like it was handmade, because that sort of defeats the purpose. When you play guitar, I believe you should be playing guitar and it should sound different than piano, right? And what's important to me is that these are actual objects. They have actually been painted. They have history in both of those terms, and that is obvious. It's also like, I'm excited that they are better in person than when you see them online. Because I've seen a lot of paintings which aren't. And to go back to the old school, like if you see a Monet water lilies painting, it is better in person than what you saw in any picture that you've seen. And that's a big deal. And I don't think that everything is like that. There are artists and there's arts that I have seen that I didn't need to see the real thing. I needed to see the online image. So I make sure to know that if it seems finished and it has everything that I want in it and everything is solidified, that I don't take it 3 steps further just to make it look crisp and just to make it look perfect. If I have any doubt about it, I leave it alone for a while and I come back to it, because then I might be like far enough away from the creation aspect to understand what it actually is. I also don't really understand which ones like resonate with people, because the ones that I love are not necessarily the ones that everyone else loves. That's an interesting conversation to have. So, but thank you. Yeah.
You know, there is a comment from a student in the chat that says, guys, I saw the exhibit today and it did look very different in person than digitally. So I also thought the video was great to show his work, etc. So I will say, you know, Kumasi, I had the pleasure of talking with you last year and we saw you, but I will say going to go see your work in person was a far different experience, you know, and I was actually glad, because you're right, digitally, you can't see some of the more details of the work, you know, for instance, the comic book the art piece as I was mentioning earlier, you know, Black in America with the two figures, you couldn't see the white privilege part whited out on digitally, but you could see it in person. And I was just like, oh wow, like that's, you know, I was like, that's to me, you know, it spoke to me there. So I do believe, you know, that it is better in person. And to me, this conversation kind of reminds me of like, you know, yeah, you can talk to somebody on FaceTime digitally, right? But you know, meeting them in person and talking face to face is a whole lot better. So
yeah, and back to what Pam was saying, they are much smaller than they appear online. Yeah. Like it is, right. It is a much smaller canvas than people are expecting.
So I got another student question here. Going along with the conversation right here. Considering that we are now in a time that seems to favor those who create digital art, do you ever think of going back and forth between digital versus traditional in order to convey messages to younger generations who rely so much on tech?
Well, I think I do digital. I do analog. I do and teach video and audio as well at the school I'm teaching at, along with analog and woodshop and all that stuff. I think what people misunderstand is that most artists are doing multiple things at the same time, and only a certain amount of it comes to light. So the fact that you see mostly the analog versus the digital doesn't mean I'm not doing it. It's just, it's not something that really comes out a lot. And these also exist in the digital space so that people can see them online or on apps. I've kind of quit apps for a minute because it was making me sad, but I'm like around in the internet. So
another student, Griffin, wants to know, what do you think about animation?
I love animation, but animation is a very different thing. Animation is a highly technical process. So I am huge into animation, anime, all forms of it. But in terms of what I do in an animation space, I would be similar to what a director of animation would be. Like I would have the idea, I would have the storyboard, I would have the character sheet, but I wouldn't be a day-to-day animator. And
yeah, gotcha. So there is
but if you're an animator, do it. Yeah.
There is another comment from one of the students. I think it's referencing our conversation we had earlier about Marvel and representation and profitability and how, you know, framing it as a as a monetary value. It says, thanks for answering my question. It got me thinking about Blade, which was Marvel's first box office success. Marvel was actually shocked at how well it was received by audiences. It's my favorite Marvel film. It says, you're totally right. The profit encouraged Marvel to produce sequels, not their recognition of representation. So just wanted to put that out there. And it's true.
It's a
like
good movie.
It is. And I'm saying I've often said, you know, if that's what kind of opens up the door to get us at the table, let's not hone on the why we're there, but make best of what we do when we get there. You know, and so if profitability opens up the market for that one film that highlights that representation, hopefully that opens the door for the other films that are going to come. And I think we will see. I do believe that even though Hollywood is late to a lot of things and what have you, I do think people are now starting to come around to see the richness of diversity and how much that does, you know, bring in terms of like market value and things like that. So I'm expecting there will be more representation as, you know, as things come along. So I do want to ask,
in a corporate sense, DEI initiatives aren't morally, they should be enacted because everyone deserves a seat at the table. It is important to have a seat at the table, and it is important to be integrated. The part that usually convinces corporate America is that you are leaving money on the table when you don't have these voices in the room, which is very, very different from like the moral obligations and the monetary like opportunities. So if one or two people of color in a position of power will stop your company from making bad decisions and will actually open up opportunities. More than that, an equal playing field will make you successful.
No,
and it's
right.
The right thing to do.
Yep. I mean, that is at the heart. I mean, you're preaching to the choir when it comes to, you know, DEI. And it's true. I do think the corporate arena, you know, we've done discussions here at the college that talks about moving DEI forward in corporate spaces, right? And because you're right, because it's like the way it's sort of implemented and plays out in a corporate arena can seem a little bit different from like DE efforts that are within higher education, or, you know what I mean? And so I've often said, yeah, all it needs, I see some blunders on the news. And I think what you just said, Kumasi, if they just had one Black person in the room, just one, to tell them that's not a good idea, it would save them from a lot of trouble. So so I'm gonna let's see if we have any other questions. No, I have a question though. And maybe you've sort of, you know, answered this, but I want to know, you know, why you talk about your why, right? You know, why is it important to express yourself through your art in the way that you do?
So when I stopped working at the time, I took like 6 months. Well, I took a bunch of time off. I'm not sure, and I actually thought about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, and everything I came up with, I would still be painting on the side. So if everything I could think of, I would maybe be doing, but like I would maybe be good at, but I would still be painting on the side, I chose to do painting. And then I realized I wasn't good enough. Like I didn't know enough. I didn't have enough of the skill because I hadn't practiced. I was really good at doing what I could do. And then I had to go back and get the education to understand what I could do, what I could steal from, what I couldn't steal from, and what I was about. So the why of this is actually harder than the work I did before, because the work I did before was incredibly conceptual, and it was paintings about painting and about the method and the history and the entire lineage of what painting is. And it was fit into that lineage at the end, and it was built upon the painting that came before it. And the difference between that is I can hide myself when I talk about that. And this is too much of an intersection between how I was raised, who I actually am, heritage, being American, and like things that make me really uncomfortable because it's sharing too much of myself. And I think that's why it's important.
So it kind of like what I'm hearing, you kind of are vulnerable through your art, right? In some aspects, in the way that you express your thoughts and your feelings. That's not like yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we also have a question in the chat here. At what age did you discover you had talent for drawing and comic books? And can you share with us what your first creation was? That comes from our DEI director, Flavio Martin.
Ooh, so like my mom can draw or could draw, and my brother drew better than I did. Like he is one of the people who can see something in his mind and draw it directly. So throughout middle, high school, I always I just assumed everybody could do it. Like, because I think as people, we discount what we're good at and elevate what other people are good at. Like I assume everyone can do art and everyone can do math because I'm good at those things. But biology, that is extraordinary to me. So I didn't realize like that I had practiced enough that I was good until I actually started to study it seriously. And I think it's really a thing where I enjoyed doing this, and then I got positive reinforcement for doing it. But I just enjoyed doing it so much that I got good at it. And then there's another level where you're good enough at the thing that you enjoy, but you study how to do it. Like, and you practice in a way that increases how your skill level at it. Because I can teach anyone how to paint, like at this point. And I'm also trying to teach the students that I have that are younger that they don't understand how good they are because they are around other artists.
Gotcha.
So I don't know when it happens, but as long as it happens, whether you're 12 or like 62, it's good when it does happen, and you should run with it.
That's good. That's good, because I'm terrible at painting, so maybe I can pick up a start now.
Yep, I got you.
Yeah. Another question from one of our students, Shanae. What artists have inspired you over the years?
Oh, so many. My favorite is Sam Gilliam. Like, he is by far my favorite artist. And like, I've met him once and I kind of didn't act like an adult when I met him. So that was weird. But like, I did my my undergrad thesis on Norman Lewis. Was really important to me as an abstract artist. All of the spiral artists were really important to me. And I have lists of artists I enjoy, Nicolene Thomas. Like, I'm just like, I love painters though. So like, I look at and I steal from painters I like. I could give you like a list. Runs a mile long.
Oh man, well, I'm pretty sure the students would love to hear it. So maybe you have to create the list and we can blast it out to them so they can find their source 100%. Of inspiration. Yeah. Let's see. For our parents out there, what were some of the little or big examples that your parents or family members did to help nurture your talent?
I can think of a bunch of them. My mom just always, like, I grew up really poor, but for some reason there were always art supplies around. And I don't understand how that happened. My dad, when we used to go to museums, because he used to take us to museums, whenever we would point out something that we liked, he would be like, oh, you could do that. And it was so casual with the way that he did it. When I was in community college, and I said to my professor at the time, we were at the BMA, and I think we were looking at, not a Cezanne, but one of the artists who does the blue people cut out paper, Matisse. So we were looking at that, and I was like, oh, I could do that. And instead of saying, no, you couldn't, she said, well, then you get an A. And I look back at that as like such a pivotal moment. And my parents before doing that same encouragement. But also when I went to go into actual work, my dad drives a truck. My baba worked at Bethlehem Steel. they both wouldn't allow me to work at those places. They said, this isn't for you. There's something else for you. So, like, yeah, I had like good mentorship.
Right. It sounds like you had a great support around you, during those years. That type of support is definitely warranted in everybody's formative years. We have another student, Gabriella. What kind of reactions do you get from your comic books?
It ranges the board. I get a lot of people who don't react because they don't consider comics as art, and they haven't put it into a place of fine art. I get people who just walk away, and I don't know what they're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to like interpersonal, like directly to me, it's usually people who enjoy the work, because it's very hard to talk about the issues that I address in the work if you have a negative reaction.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was thinking when you were saying this. I can see some people, I would probably, that look like me, who are like really like, oh yeah, this is magical, and maybe some who don't look like me is kind of like,
Yeah. Well, it's interesting when the galleries and gallery owners, or not gallery owners, specifically museums, look at it and they don't see it as high art, or it's too confrontational for the spaces that they actually want to show work in. Because I just think it's scary for some of them.
I was gonna say that's not very inclusive. If they're afraid to show, if they think it's too controversial to show this art, I don't know, maybe because I'm the type of person, kind of like you, I'm not afraid of confrontation. If anything, I kind of like invite it, especially with the art that you're expressing. It's like we kind of want to invoke those type of feelings to get the conversation going, And so I would be like, this is the type of art that you probably would want to display, right? To highlight sort of these new ideas. Yes, it might be a little bit hard to digest for some people or not, but it's art, right? And art is supposed to express many different things in many different ways. And so
I 100% agree. I think they are scared because I don't know exactly what it is, but it's sort of like when Fred Wilson first came out and did his show, like they were very scared of the reaction that they would get with that narrative in their space. So it's going to be interesting for the museums who understand what is needed and what is happening versus the ones who are just going to be, waiting.
Right. I often think, they probably know their customer base, who comes. And if a lot of their customers, are people who usually endorse, or I don't necessarily want to say finance, but, who come to these art galleries regularly. I mean, I'm pretty sure these companies, they know their audience. And if their audience sort of disagrees with it and they're scared of losing that, that means the dollars go. And then that's when things, I think, become too controversial, in some regards. But Pamela, I see that you had a question. You want to jump in?
Oh, well, no, I'm enjoying this part too. I think as a curator of an academic gallery, I would say, I don't know that all curators know their audience. Like, I think that's part of my biggest job is to listen to my community, that I do have these spaces that I oversee. And so in addition to, and my big deal is like contemporary art is the answer to everything in my mind, right? But then it's like, well, what are people asking? What are we discussing? What is happening culturally? What are artists doing? What haven't we seen in these spaces? Why is that? And so I think that that's part of the beauty of being in an academic museum or gallery, but a lot of commercial galleries also do a great job of supporting all kinds of stories. But you're right, depending on the art fair you go to, right? I went to 2 last weekend, and representing different kinds of spaces and different ideas. And some it's could be selling shoes. It's not, fashion's important, but it's different than painting. But I do say these are hard stories. I mean, it's part of what's so moving, I think, and they're so inviting, right? And comics, which is a way in for a lot of people. A lot of people have experience with loving and enjoying comics or are familiar with the genre. And then the stories are taking on the, the most heart-wrenching and true realities of our time: racism, corruption, but also just, the difficulty of being human. I mean, they're wonderful and difficult stories to look at. And I think it's really, and again, that they're these paintings that have been created by a person's hand to very carefully sort of craft and kind of expose and layer and rewrite and insert important information. It both sort of feels like a kind of, and there's so many, like it's a smaller space, but we have 40 something of these paintings up. And when I've seen them displayed before, there's a lot. And I'm really struck by one, because of what the stories are, that there's so many stories, right? The serial nature of comics also, it's like, part of you, it's like, oh my gosh, this has been going on and it's continuing to going on. And it is confrontational in that way, but in the best way that I feel like ultimately makes me hopeful. But it is hard stories. I feel like I, as a curator, have the best job in the world in that I'm in a college setting. And so you're right, Brandon, these are exactly the things that are relevant to many. And this is exactly the place to confront these ideas, acknowledge these contemporary histories, and the people, if not us, ourselves, the people who are our neighbors, who are our friends, and start to try to understand how we're complicit in these stories, or seeing them, work through by one person. Anyway, but I both the scale and just the sheer number of them, I think having them displayed in the space like that is really powerful, and a real opportunity for us here. So I'm grateful that they're here. But anyway, I don't know how to end that. But
No, thank you. Because you said something like, they are hard stories, and I think they're important stories. Like, they're real things that we have to address.
Mm-hmm.
If you send me an invite and say, we're going to a dinner party, I'm throwing a dinner party, but we're not going to talk about politics, religion, sex, or anything like that. Like, why am I coming? Like, what are we doing? We're just going to show up and eat food, but no one is going to talk about anything other than the weather? Like, we have to confront what we are, and we have to talk about these real issues to actually resolve what's going on. And
I agree.
I think everything.
I agree 100%, Kumasi, but I think the problem is people don't have the skills to know how to have these conversations, right? And you talked about earlier, you said it might be scary for somebody, when you're looking at your art. Scary for who? It's not, and that's not scary for me to talk about it, right? Because it's like a lived experience for me, but for some, it's scary because you have to confront certain, maybe your worldview or perspective is being challenged a little bit, or is being shattered, and what you've been taught now, especially when you get to college, right? College is the exploration of ideas, is what what I was taught when I was in college. It's sometimes, some of these ideas are difficult to confront and all that in nature, but this is the space for it, right? Like if we can't, especially at an institution, like a college institution, bring these minds together to have these difficult conversations, because, they're not going to happen at the dinner table, anymore. Like, kind of like you said, because nobody wants to talk about religion or politics or anything like that anymore. Pretty much, if you're at a dinner party, you're talking weather and probably reality TV, what happened on The Bachelor last week, or I don't know, 90 Days, whatever these things people watch nowadays. Not saying there's one of those shows, you could watch them, but you're right. I think that we have sort of lost communication skills in terms of like how to have these difficult conversations. And, it's kind of turned to, I think it's sort of this tribalism, right? Where it's like, I'm right, you're wrong. It's nowhere we can find common ground and come in the middle. It's not less than saying you have to 100% agree with me, but we got to have certain understandings on some common ground here in order for us to, to move forward.
It's also a point where changing your mind has been seen as a weakness.
Yeah.
Like, no, new information is supposed to change how you feel about a thing, or how you understand a thing. That is how we learn, and that is how we grow. So if I am basing my knowledge of a specific issue or a specific event on partial information, and new information comes to me, I need to reevaluate what I thought before. And changing that opinion doesn't make me less than or wishy-washy. That means I have the capacity for growth.
Right. Growth mindset is what you're speaking to, is what we try to talk to our students about.
I'm hopping in because at this point I know that some people might need to leave because of their class schedule, and so I want to thank all of those that, if you do need to hop off, for joining us today. Also, I guess some folks can't see you very well, Kumasi, while your screen shares up. So at a certain point, even though we love looking at your art, there you are. I could see you.
Yeah, they want to see your face.
See you as well while we're talking. If there are any last questions or more questions to add into the chat, or that you'd like to ask out, please do so. I'm being sensitive to time because we've already now had Kumasi for some time. So just when it's getting good.
If you have to go.
So any last ones? All right. And I, as far as, difficult ideas that we're confronting in college, I mean, I think the stories are more difficult to live than to confront from the outside. And so I'm happy to include some discomfort in our day if it helps us grow and understand more about the people around us, if not ourselves. So I think that's maybe a switch of the lens that some of us should be bringing to this discussion. It's like, yeah, it's uncomfortable, but imagine if it was your lived experience. All right, we're getting some thank yous. Anything
thank
else?
you for having me. Like, I appreciate the
Yeah,
time.
and Pam, I have a few more questions too, if you want to keep the conversation going. Yeah.
It's up to Mr. Barnett at this point.
Yeah, I have like another 15 minutes, definitely. I would say, like, while you are in school, listen to everything and pick up every piece of advice. You don't have to take it to heart, but you don't know when you're gonna need this information. It might not be right now. You might need it 10 years from now. Okay.
No, that's
for
true.
The people who are leaving.
Yeah. It's so because I was gonna say one of my closing questions, I wanted to ask you, Kumasi, is like, what is something now as an experienced artist that you wish somebody would have told you when you were a beginner artist?
You don't need a ton of people around you. Like, you don't need to have this network of 1 million people that you don't like. You just need to do your work that you find important and work with people that you like. Like, networking is really finding people that you like and like building off of that. So if you have a network of 5 people who put together a show here and there, or make a studio together, or just come together to critique each other's work, more than enough. Oh, and learn how to do a budget. Like, everyone should learn how to do a budget. And if you are given a grant, do not exceed that budget. You pay yourself in that grant, and you do not exceed the budget of the grant. You can do it.
So Jen Jenkins says her son has a picture to show you. Is there a way we can pin Jen and see the picture? I've been watching her son actually work on something. So I was excited. I was like, oh,
he's like furiously drawing. Here,
yeah.
here. Let's see if you can show him.
Oh,
He
wow.
says
that's
that
better
is
than me.
cute.
Wow, he did that right then and there this right now?
He did.
I could
Yeah, he
never.
did.
I could never.
Here's
That's
here's
really
a
good.
great thing. Like,
Yeah.
it's an amazing drawing, but also I would say when I was I don't know, when I first started teaching, I didn't understand that people listen differently. And I think you listen while you draw. And people are going to tell you you're not paying attention. And they're going to tell you, like, stop fidgeting and pay attention. But it's really important. Nice.
Yeah, that was good. Good job. Good job.
I'm this close to being like, I want it, but I know that's your work. And you should never take an artist's work from them for free. You deserve to be paid.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. So I know we still have a little bit of time. So I do want to ask a little bit about artivism, Kumasi. And I just have I'm asking, my question is, what stamp do you hope your art will leave on the world of artivism?
You know, I hope it inspires people who are better at activism than I am, who are more organized and more outgoing and more structured. Because I'm not great with paperwork. I am great with people, but not with a large number of people. So, like, I can be part of the movement and part of the support, but like, I'm better with directing than I am with steps. So I hope it talks to the people who haven't thought about the issues at the same part, but the people who are involved with the activism to know that we all have an important part to play, but we are paying attention to them, and your work is valid.
So Flavio, jump on in. The water's warm, as you always say.
Yeah, hello, artist Barnett. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you got a chance to be with us last year, and I just absolutely love this conversation. I actually wanted to bring in my niece and introduce you to her. She's a little bit shy, but I actually wanted to also showcase some of her beautiful work. Her name is Neve, and she's right where the Griffin's box is. But let me showcase some of the work that she's done. That's one of her paintings there.
Okay.
And
All right.
here's another one. She is in high school, loving it. And this is definitely one of my favorites.
Nice.
And so she is on the call right now. You could probably see her there under the Griffin's prompt. But I would love for you to meet her, and Neve, say hi.
Hi.
So
I am painfully shy as well. One of the reasons why the screen share lasts so long is because I don't want to be on screen. And super awkward. So, but like, the work is interesting and it's good.
Thank you.
I want to see more. Y'all are so talented, like
Thank you.
100%. Like,
I see
right?
like a future event. If we got to somehow get you out here, Kumasi, and then maybe have the students bring their art, and you could bring yours, and hopefully we can have this in person, and then have our artist students sort of share their work with you and get some of your feedback and guidance and direction.
I'm totally up for it. I teach right now at SAIC, so if they were like asking questions or need advice, like I'm 100% here for it.
Well, we do have, as I just started, an artist in residence project where we have had California-based artists for the last 3 years come and spend a week on our campus and meet with students and critique working classes and share and do behind the scenes kind of tours and things. And so perhaps if I can get that grant funding going, you'd be on the top of the list, sir, because it's really, it's always so exciting to share. And we have a high school on our campus, so there's even younger people. But I'm curious, you know,
Are the two students who I saw in the high school? Because I feel like I need them to come.
I'm actually a district nurse for the high school, and I got the flyer through the school, so that's how we heard about it. But this is my son; he's going into junior high.
Okay, so
Yeah, and we actually have Nivade, they go up to Upland High School. So Kumasi, one of the things I wanted to ask, since we do have, you know, some AOC students and some students who are in that transitional, very, very important pivotal moment in their life, that they are transitioning into a community college setting or a university of their interest, in order to hone in on their talent. What kinds of words of advice do you have someone that is in that pivotal moment in their life to follow this journey on their own? And what kind of advice can you offer them in words of inspiration?
well, there are many ways to get where you want to go. So it was important for me to go to community college and to go to college afterwards and then go to grad school. It also can be really important to know that you don't have to necessarily get everything right now, but trying is the most important, because effort is always going to be important to get the success that you need. Most of what you want to accomplish isn't because you're the smartest, the most talented, the fastest, the prettiest, the strongest. It's because you persevered through what came at you. So throughout school, it's about learning what is being offered to you, but it's also about putting forth the effort, either when you don't have to or when you don't understand why you're doing it. And community college is a great way to like experience life and experience it in a way that isn't as expensive as a $60,000 private university. Like, you can go straight to that university and not like it, or you can go to a community college and love what you did. I did all of my prerequisites at a community college, which allowed me to study art in depth instead of doing, like, I don't know, intro to biology, which was one of my weak points. But also, like, you don't have to have it figured out. Like, anyone who says you need to know exactly what you're going to do, ask them if they are happy with what they are doing.
So this is an off-topic kind of question, Kumasi, but if you were not an artist and you were able to chime into your talent, what would you be right now? Where would you be right now?
I would probably be in something involving math, maybe engineering, because I really do enjoy math. Like, it makes sense to me. Like, problems have answers in math, which they don't in art. So that was the number 2 thing I was going to do. And I know that's weird for an artist to say, but I really enjoy physics as well. Calculus was where it really got my start, and physics was like really interesting to me.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for that insight.
Of course.
You know, Kumasi, would you mind, I really enjoy your TikToks as well. I mean, talking about all that, I know that's like a different thing, but you do so many things, you know, as well as actively teaching, but you're painting, all the different kinds of work you do. And then these TikToks are also kind of a form of, I mean, really connecting, teaching, meeting people where they are. How did you, and you said you're a shy person. I am also a shy person. It's like, but you end up in these public, it's just how it works.
It's weird.
But
Yeah.
Can you mention those a little bit in case people want to go check them out?
Well, it's sort of like what I would want to say to my daughter, knowing that she doesn't listen to me. And so I put it out there for her to one day discover and be like, he might not be as annoying as I think he is. Because, you know, the saying, like, my parents were incredibly stupid when I was 17, but they got so smart when I was 27. Like I feel that. And it's also what I would have wanted people to tell me when I was younger. So, I mean, you can find them. I won't point people to them. It's embarrassing.
I hope you don't mind me. I mean, I found them just researching you a few years ago when I'd seen your work on social media, and then I was like, oh my gosh, I have to know more about this person. And I found them and I was like, oh, this is really.
I am who I am.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
every bit of it. So
and
I don't feel like, yeah, it's all.
Yeah, no, but it's great because it does, I feel like, yeah, it's for younger people, but for anyone, it's just like those touchstones of, checking in with yourself. Is this working for you? Have you tried this? Like, I just think it's such a generous gesture and they're fun, so anyway, I mentioned them.
Cool.
What do you think, Brandon? Any more
Uh,
questions? I know you have things.
Well, I don't know if any of our other students wanted to jump in. Some of our DEI assistants who were a part of putting this together. I know Sierra or Samantha had a question for Kumasi. I know she's been sitting here this entire time. And one thing I know about Sierra, she always has something to say. So why don't you hop on in?
And during Black History Month, huh?
Mhm.
No, I actually don't have anything to say. I came last year and I was in love. I think I finally got to see them in person at Pam's beautiful art gallery, and it evoked a totally different feeling for me. And like I saw some that I had never seen before, and I was like, you just see all the little details you put into it. And so like I just appreciate the hard work. I'm not an artist. You tell me to do Picasso, I'm doing stick figures. But I think being somebody who's appreciative of art, I definitely like you've become one of my favorites. And like because for me it's like I was always like, yeah, I know Wiley and I know like all these beautiful people that draw beautiful people and flowers, and then I'm like, but comic books are dope and I love comic books. And so I was like, it connected with me. And so I just want to thank you for like giving them, or not giving them, but allowing the school to use them for such a great reason. And thank you, Pam, because you really do speak to the students. I know they may not show up, but I hear for you around campus, and I'm like, I'm a little, so that's all I want to say, but thank you.
I appreciate you. Thank you. Sweet.
Well, maybe that's a great note to wrap it up on. Brandon, thank you so much for doing another great job.
Anytime.
Being such a great supporter. And Flavio too, I'm so glad you could make it, and everyone who made it today, but especially Kumasi J. Barnett for sharing his time with us once again. And it's such a pleasure to have your work here. Thank you for trusting us with it. And I hope that everyone that's still up until the end of March. And so if you're inspired now to come on into campus to check it out, the gallery hours are Tuesday through Thursday from 10 to 4. But if you want to call me or email me in the art gallery, I can often arrange to open at other times. Our hours are a little limited because some of our weekend hours aren't as up because we're still coming out of the pandemic. But anyway, I invite you all to enjoy the show. Look up Kumasi J. Barnett online in the socials, as the young people say, or maybe old people only say that now, probably, right? Yeah. And I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. I know I feel really inspired and excited to go forward after this. Thank you, Kumasi.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.
Yeah, Kumasi. I'm going to hang out in a room for a little bit, so we don't have to abruptly end, but I'll be hanging out for a second.
I'm going to stop the recording at this point.
That's cool.